I'm ready. I'm armed. So why am I still waiting?
This is a story about waiting that was enforced, and what happens to people when choice is taken away. Waiting feels different when it is not voluntary. There is a difference between choosing to pause and being told to stand still. In war, that difference matters more than people expect. At first, it is subtle, a tone in a voice, a delay in permission, a moment where movement is possible but not allowed. Being ordered to wait does not feel like waiting. It feels like suspension. People are told it is temporary, that the instruction exists for safety, for coordination, for control. And at first, that explanation is enough. Most people accept it without question. They tell themselves there is a reason they cannot see yet. They trust the structure. But over time, the order changes something. Waiting by choice still leaves room for intention. You can decide how to hold yourself, what to think about, what to expect. Being ordered to wait removes that space. The body remains ready, but the mind loses direction. You are no longer preparing for an outcome. You are complying with a condition. People adjust quickly, faster than they realize. They stop leaning forward. They stop anticipating movement. They learn how to exist inside the instruction. When waiting becomes an order, time behaves differently. Minutes feel monitored. Stillness feels observed. Even small movements carry weight, as if they might be interpreted as disobedience. People begin to manage not just their actions, but their appearance of readiness. The body stays alert. The mind becomes cautious. No one wants to be the one who breaks the waiting, not because it is forbidden, but because it is noticed. In environments built on command, being noticed is rarely neutral. So people learn to remain exactly where they are placed. They become good at stillness, good at silence, good at not asking. The instruction to wait slowly replaces the need to understand why. Understanding becomes unnecessary. Compliance becomes sufficient. At some point, the order no longer feels external. People begin to repeat it internally. They tell themselves to wait even when no one is watching. The instruction moves inward. It becomes habit. This is how waiting turns into obedience. Not dramatic obedience, not forced obedience, quiet obedience. People stop measuring time by what they will do next. They measure it by how long they have been still. Movement feels like interruption. Waiting feels correct. The absence of choice becomes easier than the responsibility of action. The longer the waiting lasts, the more it reshapes identity. People stop seeing themselves as decision makers. They see themselves as receivers of instruction. The self narrows. Identity compresses around readiness. You are not who you are. You are who you are waiting to be. And because the waiting is ordered, it carries authority. Authority creates permission structures. It defines what is allowed, what is premature, what is unnecessary. Even thoughts begin to fall into these categories. People delay reactions because they are unsure if reacting is appropriate. Emotion becomes regulated by instruction. Fear is postponed. Anger is postponed. Hope is postponed. Everything waits. People tell themselves they will feel later, decide later, respond later. They believe this delay is temporary. But the longer it continues, the more later loses its meaning. There is always another reason to wait. Over time, the absence of choice stops feeling like loss. It feels like relief. Choice requires responsibility. Responsibility requires risk. Ordered waiting removes both. It offers safety through limitation. As long as you are waiting, you cannot be wrong. You cannot fail. You cannot be blamed for what does not happen. This is the quiet bargain of enforced waiting. You give up direction. In return, you are given structure. And structure, even when restrictive, feels safer than uncertainty. Most people do not notice the trade immediately. They only feel its weight later when the order is lifted, when permission arrives and no one moves, when the instruction ends and no one knows what to do next. But that comes later. At the beginning, being ordered to wait feels reasonable, necessary, temporary. People tell themselves this is just part of the process. They convince themselves that movement will come when it matters. What they do not realize is that waiting under command is not neutral. It teaches the body to stay ready without purpose. It teaches the mind to delay choice. It teaches the self to shrink. At first, obedience does not feel like obedience. It feels like cooperation, like discipline, like doing what is necessary in a situation where clarity is rare. People tell themselves that following instructions is not submission, but intelligence. That restraint is not weakness, but control. That belief is what allows obedience to settle in quietly. Waiting under command begins to reshape behavior in small ways. People stop adjusting their posture. They stop testing the limits of stillness. They learn where their presence is expected and where it is tolerated. They learn how to remain visible without drawing attention. Obedience in this form does not demand agreement. It only requires repetition. Each time a person waits when they could move, the instruction becomes easier to follow. The body remembers before the mind does. Muscles learn restraint. Breathing becomes shallow. Movement becomes deliberate, minimal, justified. People start to anticipate the instruction before it arrives. They stop preparing to act and start preparing to wait. Readiness shifts direction. It no longer points forward. It points inward, toward containment. This is where waiting becomes obedience. Not because force is applied, but because force is no longer necessary. The instruction has been absorbed. People begin to regulate themselves. They correct their own impulses. They delay their own reactions. They silence questions before they form. The environment does not need to enforce compliance anymore. Compliance has become internal. This is efficient. This is quiet. This is difficult to detect. Obedience like this does not look dramatic. There are no raised voices, no visible resistance. Everything appears calm, orderly, controlled. But inside, something has narrowed. Choice becomes conditional. People start to ask themselves not what do I want to do, but is this the right time? That question slowly replaces intention. Over time, it replaces desire. Desire becomes impractical in environments where permission determines outcome. People do not stop wanting things. They stop expecting those wants to matter. Waiting trains them to delay not just action, but identity. They begin to see themselves less as participants and more as placeholders. They are present, but only in anticipation of instruction. Their sense of self remains incomplete, suspended between readiness and restriction. Language adapts to this condition. Statements become cautious. Sentences end without conclusions. Words like maybe, later, and if replace certainty. Even confidence is reformatted to fit uncertainty. The longer obedience continues, the more natural it feels. People stop noticing how often they wait. They stop noticing how rarely they decide. The absence of choice becomes invisible. Obedience also changes relationships. People compare compliance without speaking about it. Those who wait well are seen as reliable. Those who hesitate are seen as unstable. A silent hierarchy forms around stillness. Waiting becomes a skill. Obedience becomes a qualification. Those who internalize it fastest are rewarded. They are trusted. They are relied upon. They are placed in positions that require restraint rather than initiative. Over time, initiative begins to feel inappropriate. Even emotions fall into line. Fear is managed. Anger is deferred. Curiosity is muted. People learn which reactions are acceptable and which ones create friction. They learn to express concern in neutral tones, to ask questions that sound like confirmations, to show readiness without urgency. This kind of obedience does not feel oppressive. It feels stabilizing. It offers a framework in which uncertainty is managed through compliance. As long as the instruction exists, responsibility is limited. As long as waiting is required, failure is postponed. People begin to associate obedience with safety. And safety, in environments shaped by conflict, becomes a powerful incentive. Over time, waiting stops feeling like something imposed. It feels like something chosen. People tell themselves they are patient, that they are disciplined, that they are in control of their reactions. They reinterpret obedience as strength. What they do not notice is that the capacity for refusal has weakened. Refusal requires clarity. Clarity requires distance. Waiting collapses. When choice disappears, it does not vanish all at once. It fades, slowly, quietly, like a light that dims so gradually no one notices the room has changed. People continue to function. They continue to follow routines. From the outside, nothing appears broken, but inside, something essential has narrowed. Without choice, action loses its meaning. Movement becomes execution rather than intention. People do not ask what they want to do next. They ask what is allowed. Over time, even that question feels unnecessary. The absence of choice becomes the default condition. People adjust to this state faster than they expect. They learn how to exist without deciding. They learn how to wait for signals rather than trust instincts. The self becomes conditional, activated only when permission is granted. This is not paralysis. It is adaptation. People still move. They still speak. They still react. But each response is filtered, measured, delayed. Everything must pass through an invisible checkpoint. Is this the right time? Is this appropriate? Is this necessary? Eventually, those questions replace desire altogether. When choice is removed, responsibility shifts. Decisions are no longer owned. Outcomes are no longer personal. This offers relief. Without choice, there is no blame. Without agency, there is no failure. People learn to survive by minimizing themselves. The self contracts. People stop imagining alternatives. They stop rehearsing futures. They stop considering paths that require initiative. The world becomes smaller, not because options are gone, but because options are no longer perceived. This is what waiting under command leaves behind. A person who can endure uncertainty, a person who can remain still, a person who can comply, but also a person who struggles to begin. When the instruction ends, confusion follows. Freedom does not arrive with clarity. It arrives with exposure. Without orders, people feel unanchored. They hesitate. They look for structure that no longer exists. They wait for permission that will not return. Some people try to reclaim choice immediately. They force themselves into motion. They make decisions quickly, sometimes recklessly, just to prove they can. Others retreat. They delay. They search for familiar constraints. Both reactions come from the same place: uncertainty about who they are without instruction. Choice requires practice, and waiting has undone that practice. The habits formed under command persist. People sit where they can see exits. They stand when others stand. They pause before speaking, even when no one is watching. The body remembers rules the mind no longer needs. This residue does not announce itself as damage. It presents itself as caution, as discipline, as control. But over time, the cost becomes clear. Relationships strain under delayed responses. Opportunities pass while people hesitate. Moments that require initiative feel overwhelming. People second-guess impulses that once felt natural. They mistrust their own judgment. Without choice, identity becomes reactive. People define themselves by how well they respond to external signals. When those signals disappear, identity feels incomplete. There is a sense of waiting for something undefined, a lingering expectation that instruction will return and restore order. Some people never leave this state. They wait through peace. They wait through quiet. They wait through ordinary life. Waiting becomes a lens through which everything is interpreted. Calm feels suspicious. Silence feels temporary. Stability feels borrowed. People remain prepared for interruption even when none comes. This is the final consequence of enforced waiting, not fear, not trauma in the traditional sense, but an unfinished relationship with choice. The war does not need to continue for this condition to persist. The instruction has already been learned. It has already been internalized. The waiting no longer requires authority. It sustains itself. And that is why the end of conflict rarely feels like an ending. For many, it feels like a removal of structure. Without waiting, there is nothing to lean against. Without instruction, there is no script. What remains is a quiet question that no one taught them how to answer. What do I do now? For some, the answer slowly emerges, through repetition, through failure, through relearning the weight of decision. Choice returns.